Welcome to College in Conversation, the official podcast of Lingfield College. Join me, Matthew Harris, alumnus and host, as I talk to the staff, students and community, showing you exactly what life is like at Lingfield. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of College in Conversation. Now this is an incredibly special episode because today I'm sat down to talk with the amazing Paul Yeates. Now the surname Yeates might be known to quite a few of you at the senior school as you might be in Yeates House, and today I'm sat down with the very gentleman that your house is named after. So we're going to talk about his role at the school when he was here, the history of Lingfield and all manner of what comes up in between. So Paul Yeates, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you, and it's great to be back.
We're thrilled to welcome you back. It's absolutely wonderful, and I was a student at the school when you were a much more present figure on school campus, so I was here 99 to 2012. Gosh, that feels long ago now, but I remember you around the school at that time, and it's wonderful to have you back. So for those who might not know much about you, would you mind taking us back to the beginning of your association with the school and what you did while you were here?
Yes, well, my family moved to Lingfield when I was a teenager, 16 years old. And I first became involved at Notre Dame as an altar server in the Sisters' Chapel. Years later, our three children came as students to the school. And at that time, after a few years, I co-founded the Parents Association to raise funds and have social events on behalf of the parents. So that was the start.
I love that you must have had a really positive experience in the chapel when you were younger to then come back to the school and send your kids here. Was there anything in the interim, or was it when you had children, you just that school came into your head because obviously you were local to Lingfield? What was the decision between sending them here?
After my teenage years, I went to university and later started teaching biology in Hawley. And then I went off to East Africa and taught biology in Uganda for 5 years.
Wow, what was that like?
That was terrific. Yeah, it's a great place to be. I was quite surprised. I went on behalf of the Ministry of Overseas Development, and I expected to be teaching in a mud-walled, thatch roof type school, but it wasn't like that at all. It was a very, very well-established school, and I had all the facilities I wanted as a biologist, and of course Africa is a wonderful place to be as a biologist.
Oh yeah, of course. That's one. I mean, I visited South Africa with my mum many years ago and had a wonderful time out there. That was amazing. The culture, the wildlife. It's such an incredible part of the world. And you mentioned you founded the Parents Association. Was it when you were at the school as a parent? Well, I want to go to a really significant moment in the school's history. Now, we covered this from a different perspective when I sat down with Heather Francis a few weeks ago, a dear friend of yours, and it was a really huge moment in the school's history when the sisters, the nuns, decided to leave. They decided to move on, and it was up in the air whether or not the school would be able to carry on. Now, rather than me fill in the details and most likely get something wrong, I'd love you to give us a little bit of background to what that was like at the time and the decision yourself and the others that became the Gang of Four made to basically save the school.
Well, it all came as rather a surprise. It started with a phone call from Sister Rita Ryan, who was the mother of the house at that time. And she said, "Will I attend a meeting?" "Oh, yes, of course, sister. What for?" "Oh, well, I'll tell you later."
Yeah, you'll be sat down.
She was somewhat guarded.
Yes.
Anyway, I agreed to come to the meeting and was introduced to the three other parents, Jim Higgins, David Clubb and Chris Bell. We hadn't met before. Our children were at different stages in the school. And then we were taken along to what the sisters called the parlour. And in the parlour, there's a big table in the middle of the room, and behind it sat three 3 other gentlemen. And we were introduced to the sisters' advisors. One was the financial advisor, another one was the lawyer, another one, an accountant, I can't remember now. But anyway, they're advisors. And we sat down in opposite, and then the bombshell hit us.
Absolutely.
We're about to leave, and they asked us if we'd be interested in forming an educational trust to buy the school. As it had come out of the blue, we decided that we needed to talk about it further, and we said we'd return in a fortnight's time. We went home. I lived just around the corner from the school at that time. We went home and introduced ourselves to one another. Of course,
yes, you hadn't met.
We spoke briefly about what an educational trust meant, and then we introduced ourselves. One was a solicitor, Chris Bell. Jim Higgins was an accountant. David Clubb was a PR man for BP, and I was the ex-teacher. So they said, well, you better be chairman in that case. So that's how it happened. We went back after in the preceding fortnight, we started to investigate the situation. Within a fortnight, we'd raised the money, and we started on the basics of an educational trust. Went back to the sisters after a fortnight and said, yes, we're prepared to take it on, but obviously we'll need the support of the parents.
Of course, and on that note, I'd love to sort of segue on to, I mean, you're probably setting it up anyway, that meeting that happened in the auditorium that
yes.
you wrote about in your book, that we'll
yes.
get to your book later in this podcast. It's magnificent. This meeting that occurred in the auditorium. Now, the auditorium itself, a lot of the furnishings there, the floor, the stage and all that is very similar to what it was way back in the 60s. So
yes.
if you go into that auditorium today, it's pretty much what it would have looked like back in the day when you had this exact meeting. Tell us about that meeting. I would love to hear it from your perspective.
Okay. Well, I suppose there was a degree of intimidation. As we walked up onto the stage, there were 700 plus parents sitting there discussing where they were going to send their daughters next, because it was an all-girls school, of course, where they were going to send their children in the future. I know that because our wives were in the audience too.
Hopefully supporting you from they were like, this is going to be rubbish, guys. I don't know.
So I made the introduction, and then each of us spoke to the audience, describe exactly how we proposed to take over the school from the sisters, and to do it in a very positive way, that we were confident it would happen and the school would continue to flourish. But lots of very negative questions came, and it was quite clearly people were very upset, and quite honestly, understandably so. Then after half an hour or so, one gentleman got up, one of the parents, and said, we shouldn't be discussing leaving. We should be supporting these chaps. They're sticking their necks out. They're prepared to give a lot of their time to ensure the school continues. We should support them. And from that moment onwards, it all changed, and they all got behind us and remained behind us once the trust was formed. This was April 86. And we took over the school in January 87.
It's almost like something out of a film, isn't it? Having that one parent stand up and go, "Oh, everyone, listen to me."
Yes.
That moment there, that the school's history really did turn on a dime, as it were, and it went your way. It wasn't a paid plant, no? It was.
Well, no, it wasn't a plant. But when it happened, I thought, I should have set that up.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That is. I want to hear from this guy. No, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad said gentleman stood up and you got the backing that you all deserved, considering a bit previously when you were called into the parlour, as you mentioned, you had no idea what was going on. And what's quite remarkable is any one of you at that moment could have backed out. Not because you thought it was a bad idea, but because you didn't think it was a role of responsibility that you wanted to take on. So for all of you to sit down there and not just say, we can do this, but to do it, is really something, and I think the kids here, whether they are aware of it or not, should be grateful for your four's work and all the parents that backed you.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk about the appointments of headmasters and headmistresses, because this is a process that very few people will know much about. And obviously, you were really key in the selection and hiring of the 3 heads that we've had since the nuns left. Because obviously we didn't have a headmistress or headmaster. You'd have, I don't know what the title would be, but wasn't it, did you say Sister Rita Ryan was sort of the head nun, as it were? So you and the Board of Governors would have hired firstly Gerald Davies, secondly Nuala Shepley, and then Richard Bull, who is our headmaster to this day. I'd love to ask you, what is the process like looking for and recruiting a headmaster, headmistress for a school, and what are the qualities that drew you to each of the 3 that you hired? If you can remember back to those interviews, or at least in their work, that would remind you of said qualities.
Initially, of course, we had no experience of hiring head teachers, so we took advice from a company that is experienced in advertising and producing candidates for selection. First experience, we didn't have a large number of prospective head teachers. The word had got round that the school was likely to close, and so you can imagine that people were perhaps a little bit reluctant to get involved. But by January 87, we had produced a number of candidates, and the 4 of us interviewed them. And this is really before the full governing body was established. So the responsibility came down to us. And Gerald Davis was appointed and was with us for about 5 years, if I recall, before he left to take another post elsewhere. At that stage, we were wondering how we should go about it. I remembered a visit to a school in Sussex who had a very lively headmaster. And so I went to see him one evening, and over a pint, we discussed the potential.
1 pint, was it?
We discussed the potential of him coming to Notre Dame. After some consideration, probably a couple of weeks, he decided that he had 4 children in his school, and he felt it would be too disruptive for them to come. But he made a recommendation, and that recommendation was Nuala Shepley.
I never knew that. I never knew that came from a conversation and a recommendation. That's amazing.
Yeah. Over a pint.
Over a pint.
So I said to him, well, do you know her phone number? Can I call? He said yes. But this was, as I say, about a fortnight later, and he said, just give me a chance to ring her. And then I called her, and she said, yep, I'll come down and see you, see the school. And when she came, she knew as much about the school, if not more, than I did. She'd done a lot of research. And then we set up a further meeting. By then we had a governing body, and we set up a further meeting for her to meet the full governing body. She impressed us from the start. A very dynamic, well-experienced teacher. She was deputy head of a school in Cheshire. That's really how it happened.
She was headmistress for me my entire time here up until year 13.
Well, you know how dynamic she was.
Exactly, yes, my word. The amount of energy that lady had was remarkable. And I mentioned, as I said, we spoke to Heather, and I brought up her amazing talent of being able to remember every single pupil's names and parents' names, past and present, on site.
Extraordinary.
Truly something special, whether that was a God-given gift or something she trained in her memory, I'm not sure.
If you would like to sponsor our podcast,
please email marketing@lingfieldcollege.co.uk. Of course, she was here for a significant period of time and really put her stamp on the school. She had a support from a really great selection of staff. Her and John Barnes made a huge amount of improvements to the grounds and facilities. But then it came time for her to move on, to leave, and that was probably as significant a change as the nuns leaving, really. I mean, someone who really represented the school to her core moving on must have been a really interesting period for yourself and the Board of Governors at the time. I'd love to talk about what that felt like, and then your search for our new headmaster, who's been here quite a while now.
Well, we did that in a slightly different way.
Not over a pint this time.
Not over a pint. We engaged a company who did all the advertising for us, and we had something in excess of 40 applicants, all high quality. Most of them were deputy heads in school elsewhere. We gradually, over a period of time, working together, initially just as the trustees, going through all their curriculum vitae. And if I recall, we then, from the 40, I think we selected 10, the ones we felt we were really interested in. And then that was finally, I think we interviewed the 10, but that was finally reduced to 3, 2 gentlemen and a lady, all high-quality candidates. And at that stage, all the governors were involved. We met here, if I recall, we met here for the general meeting, and I think my wife and I took each candidate to a local hotel for tea for an informal interview. And it worked very well. We were impressed with them all, but clearly Richard Ball was the outstanding candidate.
Like Nuala Shepley before him, he's really gone about putting his own stamp on the school.
Indeed,
I remember I was part of the head student team in his first year here, and it was very clear that he knew exactly what he wanted to do, how he was going to go about it, and there was no doubt that it was going to happen. I mean, it's a huge simplification of what his goals would have been at the time, but I remember improving the sports facilities and the results of the sports teams, and going into more detail on the sports side of things was definitely a huge thing I remember in year 13, which didn't help me. I was rubbish at sports. So I was like, oh no. But I know that's something, and since coming back to work as a member of staff here in the interim from 2012 and then coming back in 2020, even though my brother was at the school at the time, but seeing the change through those years is really something. And talking about change through the school, you wrote an incredible book about Lingfield.
Thank you.
The title is, got it in front of me, you see. It's Commemorating 75 Years, A History of Lingfield Notre Dame School, 1940 to 2015 by Paul Yeates. Now, this was obviously published on the 75th anniversary, and it's sort of been my Bible in terms of looking at things for alumni, old Lingfieldians, and the history of the school. There's no source better. I'd love to ask you, what was the decision behind writing a book like that? How on earth did you find all this information out? And are there any sort of tidbits of the history of the school that people might not know off the top of their heads? Sorry, that was a 3-part question. You can answer it however you like.
I'd retired from my professional life, and I was still very much involved as chairman of the governors. And I still had contacts with past members of staff. Indeed, I still had a good contact, and indeed still do, with the sisters in Canada, the retired sisters. One of them was Sister Joan Helm, who formerly had been the head teacher in the junior school. And she had become the archivist for the sisters. That, of course, was my main contact, and I was able to obtain a lot of information, certainly about the early days of when the sisters came here. So I was able to get information and lots of photographs. Many of the photographs in the book my family photographs of my children in different classes and at different functions. And then once I got going with the book, I wandered round the school taking photographs of all the developments as they happened. We've got a new sports hall in the senior school. Photographs of that on the outside and the inside, the students in action. We had a sports hall at the junior school, so I did the same. So I gradually built up the information, probably over, 2 or 3 years, with the projected date of the 70th anniversary of the school. Or was it the 75th? Forgive me.
75th. I don't know. Yes. You were busy taking pictures. I don't expect you to.
I've been taking it for 5 years.
No, that's amazing. It's such an incredible book. I think we've got to try and find a way to get more copies of it made, because there are some out there, but I know we're in the process of getting it digitally archived currently, so there will be a copy of it available online at some stage. But it's truly a really, really special book, and I've learned so much reading it. We made a Founders Day video 2 years ago during COVID when we weren't allowed to have the service, and without that we wouldn't have known where to start. So it is a truly a special work of...
Thank you. Well, it was a great joy, a great pleasure to put it all together.
Well, you can tell it comes through in the language. It's magnificent. And the last thing I'd like to ask you about is in the 2012-2013 academic year. So in prep school, the houses are still Patrick's, George, Andrew's and David's, and they were when I was at the school. And the year after I left, it was announced that the houses were going to be changed to Yeates, Higgins, Clubb and Bell. Firstly, were you aware that was going to happen?
No, not at all. It came as a complete surprise.
And then secondly, I'd just like to ask you if you can summarise how that made you feel, and to know that your name will continue here with association for the school forever.
Well, it's certainly a great honour for the four of us. From the onset, we got on extremely well. Each of us did our bit to make it all happen. Obviously, Chris Bell, as a solicitor, formulated a trust. Jim Higgins raised a considerable sum of money to purchase the school in the first place. And David Clubb presented the school in a very positive way. So we worked well as a team. Sadly, of course, Jim Higgins and David have both since died. But we were all greatly honoured by being named as the houses. I mean, I got used to the houses being in the original format because my 3 children were here.
Of course.
But so it came as a great surprise, but it was a great honour and a delight for myself and, of course, the family.
I think I can speak for everyone who's had an association with the school to say that that is truly aptly deserved for all 4 of you. So long may that continue, and long may it be that people know why those houses are labelled that way. And thank you for yourself and the rest of the Gang of Four's work. And obviously we would have loved to have been able to sit down with everyone and have that chat, but it's been truly magnificent to sit down today and have this conversation with you. It's been a real joy, and I've learnt more about the school, and it's wonderful. So thank you so much for coming in, and you are welcome anytime here at Lingfield, as I'm sure you know, and I hope the listeners enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
It's been a great pleasure to be with you. Once again, I nearly said Lingfield Notre Dame.
Oh no, we'll get told off by marketing for that.
You better erase that bit.
So if this is still in, then something went wrong. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to welcoming you back for another conversation at Lingfield College very soon.